Hi, my name is Mick Rogers from Axial Benefits Group, and today we continue the series of short video segments that we started about 12 weeks ago at the beginning of the quarantine. During that time, there were so many of you that had questions, thoughts, anxieties that we thought it would be helpful to put together a series of small video interviews so that you could hear right from the experts about their most common questions that were being asked at the time. Most of those questions were in the areas of benefits, retirement, employment law, HR policies, procedures, maybe some financial issues, things like that. So today we thought it would actually be helpful for you to hear from our senior team members of the employee benefits practice. I'm excited to have the three of these folks on today and introduce Shauna Brackett, the Director of Client Services, and her two most senior and tenured account managers, Lindsay Diggins and Mary Ponte. These are the folks that have been working overtime behind the scenes during the quarantine to keep our clients' needs satisfied, as well as providing advice, keeping everything up to date, or finding other resources that they may need outside of the benefits themselves. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So it's certainly been a busy 12 weeks, to say the least, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd all agree that if someone told us that in the beginning of March that on an unplanned basis we'd be shutting down the office and all working from home and coordinating remote teams and remote work, all the client work that normally had to happen, that childcare would shut down, schools would shut down, and the normal would be sort of everything going on in your home at once. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be busy as ever with our work. No one would have really believed that, it would have been a reality and really lasted this long. So let's dig right in, though, because I think, as we look at the current data today, it really does look like, from a positive standpoint, we're making our way out of this pandemic, albeit slowly. A lot of us are starting to think about the work that it's going to take to get our employees who've been working at home for the last 12 weeks back into the office environment. Before we do that, though, let's reflect back on the last 12 weeks a little bit and go into some things that I think that we've learned and we'll be able to take forward, whether this happens again or whether it's just a normal work environment. So let me ask, I guess I'll start with Mary. Mary, when we first started going to the work from home environment, what were some of the really sort of rapid fire, quick things that we all had to sort of like put in place for the home procedures, policies, et cetera?
Yeah, so one thing we saw during this pandemic was this immediate need to quarantine and to social distance, which removed all of us from the typical office setting very quickly. I think we recognize that not all companies are in the line of business to remote work, but those that are might want to consider what they did successfully during this time, and then improve upon anything that wasn't so successful. So should something like this happen again in the future, something you ought to consider is if you and your staff are equipped to hit the ground running again. Sometimes companies, something they may want to consider doing now for the future is to make your workforce capable of working from home and having work from home procedures and policies in place. I think updating your employee handbook is a good place to start with these policies and procedures. Employees or employers should get the most out of their employee handbook by using them as tools to build workplace morale, answer questions for employees. I think a well-drafted handbook can be used to communicate the employer's vision for the workplace, whether it's in office or remote. as well as important information you can use for employment rules, policies, like work from home procedures. On the opposite end of that spectrum, a poorly drafted handbook that's missing pertinent information like this can create confusion, liability. We just want everyone to be aware of the pitfalls if it's not drafted correctly. So adding a work from home or remote work section to your handbook as a standalone, or putting it in your emergency procedure section, laying out the company's expectations during unusual times like this, can stand to eliminate that initial confusion that we saw at the beginning of this pandemic.
Yeah.
If you need help starting your employee handbook, don't forget that Axial clients have access to the employee handbook builder through Axial University, or of course, your account manager can send you a template to get you started with that. I think the second kind of obvious big task in establishing work from home measures is to ensure that your team has the proper work setups, right? So laptops, computer access, the appropriate shared drives, establishing registrations and logins for webinars, conference calls. I know we've been big with Zoom.
Right.
Other things to consider.
I think a lot of people got caught short on that, right? You know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think other things to consider is if your staff need access to printers or scanners, if they do but you can't get them, maybe something like DocuSign.
Right.
Another consideration would be access to voicemail, landlines, or using the app that we use. And then putting these instructions for all of those pieces in your handbook or in some sort of shareable PDF version, so it's available right from the start, should something like this happen again quickly.
Right.
And then the last thing, and probably the most important, is to have a dedicated communication strategy for disseminating electronic materials that is in line with ERISA requirements.
Right.
Right. So as we're seeing now, there's a lot of information being shared: insurance plan updates, leave policy changes, DOL regulations, that all need to be shared with employees. So a question to ask yourself is really, what's the best way to get this information to employees who aren't in the office? Right. Under ERISA regulation, employee consent must be given in order to receive electronic copies of benefit materials in certain situations. So if you're sharing electronically, what makes the most sense for your employees who are remote? Make sure that you have that electronic acknowledgement receipt in place. It may be a good time to have them sign the acknowledgement at the time of initial hire, or if you're using an enrollment platform, pushing it out that way. If you're already having folks sign the acknowledgement, are you using an intranet site or an HRIS system where you can share these benefit updates and regulations as kind of a one-stop shop rather than email? And again, outline whatever method you choose in your handbook as part of the procedure for work from home. We at Axial largely utilize email, but we also have Burning Portal for our benefit subscribers, so we can push out benefit related information just to those subscribers rather than clogging up everybody's email with that information.
I know that, I mean, certainly during the initial sort of phases of the pandemic, I mean, my email looked like a Twitter feed with all these different responses on my email. So I appreciated having some of these updates not come on my email.
Right. I just think the overall goal here is to have kind of a clear continuity plan in play so that you can hit the ground running should this ever happen again.
Great. I think that, you know, I think it's important that we sort of, you know, go through the exercise of being ready if something like this ever does happen again. I know that, you know, we were just about there, so we really recovered very quickly. But had we not, I mean, it would have taken, you know, four weeks to really just to get up and be productive. So let's talk about, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about from the policies and procedures to Lindsay. I know that there were some mandated plan changes that needed to go on. We saw a lot of enhancements, even modifications from the policies from a medical standpoint or a benefit standpoint. What were some of the predominant ones that we saw, that we changed, that we had to change, or that people are adding?
So yeah, so there's a few, but I want to break it up into two sections. So first, I'll just go over a few of the changes of the health plans, and then I'll go into a couple of things about the flexible spending account and dependent care accounts. But for the health plan, so back on March 27th, when the CARES Act was signed into law, there were a few changes for, both fully insured plans and self-funded plans. So the biggest one was that they covered testing of COVID at 100%. So no employee share whatsoever. That was mandatory for both fully insured and self-funded clients. The other one was treatment of COVID for fully insured plans. That was implemented with all carriers, 100% no cost share to employees. For self-funded plans, though, they had the option of making that change. So they had the option of covering that at 100% for employees or leaving their plans as is. The other one, related to health plan changes was telehealth. So for all fully insured plans, all the carriers required telehealth visits to be covered at 100%. Again, no cost share to the employee. But for self-funded plans, they actually had the option of adding that benefit. But those are the three biggest changes. Again,
and most of our
the most prevalent one.
Most of our clients in our coalitions or our self-funded plans, did they elect those benefits?
They did, yeah. So most clients, after consulting with us, did decide to cover the treatment at 100% just to keep everything streamlined for their employees. Yep, good. Exactly. But so just moving over to the flexible spending and dependent care accounts, and these are actually more recent as well. We've been getting a ton of questions on this. But for plan years ending in 2020, employers have the option of letting employees either revoke their elections or increasing or decreasing their elections, or actually enrolling in the plan.
Which has been a huge departure on the normal sort of process of the IRS saying you elect your deduction once and you carry it through for the full year.
Right.
And now
exactly.
they've made accommodations to sort of change that, because folks are going to end up either with extra money or not enough money and in their accounts to handle their healthcare costs, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have money in there thinking that they, have a procedure scheduled for, June, July, August, or whenever during the year. They're saving that money in there, and then all of a sudden they get a call from the doctor saying the office is shut down, or they need to get it rescheduled. So, a lot of people
it's worth noting that that at least in flexible spending account, it's use it or lose it, right? So that's right.
Yeah, exactly. So, that just relieves a lot of the burden and stress off of employees, knowing that they can make those changes. But again, it was the employers can choose to do that. Most are choosing to do that. But if anyone ever has any questions on that, definitely reach out to your account managers. We can help you work with your carrier that you're working with to get the amendments, straight for that plan.
Yeah, I think that was a welcome relief. It came at the end, but it was a welcome relief. So sort of next sort of topic, we live in this benefits world, right? And we see benefits that are highly utilized, benefits that are underutilized. And we'd love to maybe sometimes flip them, right? And promote some of the underutilized benefits. What were some of the traditionally underutilized benefits that got some really good play during the pandemic sort of shutdown, quarantine, et cetera?
I think one of the most underutilized benefits that we should highlight is telemedicine. And especially with video conferencing.
Yeah.
Many of our clients already had telemedicine built into their plans. However, before COVID-19, I think we would all agree that this was a benefit highly underutilized. I think this is forecasted to change going forward for a number of reasons. As we saw over the past few months, telemedicine was not only used as a method of social distancing, but also as things progressed for the worse, we saw many hospitals and doctors' offices shut visits down completely for non-emergency patients. Another reason we'll probably see a spike in this service going forward is that many employees who were perhaps hesitant and never made the move to telemedicine before COVID now have. So they're probably feeling fairly comfortable with it, more apt to use it again. They've registered their accounts already, and they've realized how convenient it is.
Mary, I think that this video conferencing medicine is probably going to be the number one thing that comes out of this, right? I think that people will promote this and it will change. And, you know, from a cost standpoint, it's more efficient to do that. And we're happy to sort of like see some of that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a really good point that this was a big one.
Definitely. I think that's exactly right. And if you already have a telemedicine benefit, going forward, promoting it as important as you would an ER visit or specialist visits during open enrollment would be the way to go. Although it's, you know, not a complete replacement for direct patient care, it can be useful for simple evaluations, diagnosis, prescribing treatment during other periods like cold and flu seasons too. Eliminating the need for patients to go sit in, you know, germy doctors' offices,
Right.
Waiting to see a doctor. So I would strongly urge that you consider adding it if you don't have it. And if you don't have it, reach out to myself or Lindsay or Shauna or your account manager, and we can get a quote for you on that easily.
Yeah, you know, so the thing that sort of surprised me is as well as the sort of utilization of the video conferencing sort of medicine was the use of wearable technologies, right? So that the video, the doc on the other side of the video could mail the patient a wearable technology that then they could get live readings right from them on the screen. It made it very, very practical. How about some of the other underutilized benefits that we saw?
Another one that, you know, aside from telehealth, that's been a huge point of discussion is the EAP, so employee assistance programs.
Sure.
So historically, it's been very underutilized. A lot of the times, actually, it's buried within like a life or disability plan that most, you know, people don't even know that they have. But it's really a great resource for employees who are dealing with, you know, any sort of, you know, personal issues. So especially in times like this, they have anxiety just about the whole situation in general, or, you know, they just got laid off or furloughed, or, you know, anything that, you know, is related to, you know, helping the employees deal with the stress of all, you know, the situation. It's really just a great benefit. And again, just like telehealth, you know, I think it's super important that, you know, once you have this benefit, that to promote it to employees, because, you know, they're gonna, you know, take great appreciation in that we've gotten great feedback, you know, in the plans that we've set up that clients didn't have before this, but now they do have.
I mean, I'm not even sure how many, you know, clients in general or businesses that actually know that they even have an EAP, right? Because it's so buried.
Yeah, I mean, most don't. You know, I was actually surprised to know that, you know, see that most people don't realize that they have it. But again, it's a great resource for employees, just for somewhere, you know, for them to turn to, not just at home, but to help with their, you know, work life as well. And then it, you know, it's beneficial for everyone in that instance. So,
well, we were offline sort of talking before the session, and we were saying that, you know, your work life and your home life during this quarantine sort of became one, right? And it was really helpful to have sort of one resource, right? So let's talk a little bit about mental health, because mental health, I know that we wanted to sort of like talk a little bit about and share some stats. Shauna, do you want to sort of take that?
Yeah, sure. I think that not necessarily a plan enhancement or modification, but definitely something we've gotten a lot of questions on from our clients. 46% of US adults will experience a mental illness during their lifetime, and 5% of those will experience mental illness each year. So given that prevalence, you can obviously expect your employees to experience some type of mental illness or issue during the quarantine, and especially during the pandemic. So a couple simple ways that you can promote mental health is just one, regular check-ins with your employees, just to kind of get a pulse check on where they're at. If they need assistance, you can promote the EAP program if you have one, like Lindsay said. Monitor and adjust workloads if needed. Again, the work from home, it's really hard sometimes to distinguish work and home and shutting off work. So some adjustments there might be needed. Make it possible for your employees to get help either through the EAP program or promote your mental health visits on your medical plan. And then lastly, we have a ton of flyers and posters, templates of emails that you can send out to your employees on our Axial University that have lists of things that they can do at home and if you're back in the office to promote that mental health.
Yeah, I think the big thing about this section of our talk here is that I really hope that all three of these start to continue. That after this pandemic, after this quarantine, we continue to have employers promoting these three things, because not only are they helpful for the employee, not only are they a good, solid, easy benefit to sort of have, but they help lower the cost, right? If we can catch these issues up front, if we can get them in a lower cost environment, if we can utilize something that's already being paid for, like an EAP, and it's being paid for by your long-term disability, I think those are all really important things that we just need to keep in mind going forward. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about going forward, because it really does look like we're coming out of this quarantine effort, and we're trying to think about, business leaders are trying to think about how to get these employees now that are used to working at home, for the last 12 weeks, how are we going to get them back into a work environment? I think I heard the other day someone say, if we think it's going to be like a long weekend and everyone just show up Monday and it's going to be like a normal work day, I think that's just really not realistic. What kind of questions are we getting, and what kind of advice are we giving out for things to think of as folks develop their back to office strategies?
Yeah, so I think the common things that we're seeing are obviously updated workplace layouts. So if you have a ton of cubes, just make sure people are 6 feet apart. Education on social distancing and behavior.
There's actually some guidance too, here in Mass with the state regs of how high open cubes can be.
Yep,
right?
The walls.
Minimums. Yep.
Education for your employees on social distancing and behavioral changes. I think people are going to be very different and a little hesitant getting back into the workplace. So you have to be very cognizant of that. Updates in education for your employees on cleaning and, hand washing, keeping everything clean and sanitized. The use of face masks is going to be different going back into the offices. It's required in most states. Adjusting meeting practices is a big one too, whether they be internal or external. We've been under the guidance of keeping it virtual when possible. Business travel policies, whether you choose to either restrict or reduce business travel, make sure you have a policy in place for that. And I think the biggest thing is just general employee education on COVID prevention, symptoms, and staying home if you're sick.
Yeah,
is a big one to stress.
I think that's socially that will change, right? I know that historically that's been sort of overlooked. If you're not feeling well, you come to work, right? And now I think it's really been highlighted that if you're not feeling well, you show symptoms, don't go to work, right? So lastly, let's talk about Axial for a second. As we move back into some of what traditionally is our busiest time, we've got pre-renewal strategy meetings for almost all of our clients. We've got underwriting projections. We've got renewal projections. We've got a whole lot of work just to get the renewal process going for our largest renewal cycle at the beginning of next year or the end of this year. What expectations are we setting for our clients with regards to what we're doing right now?
Yeah, so the ABG team's been remote since March 13th. I can't believe it's been that long already.
Oh my God.
But all of our team members were well equipped for remote work before that. So we didn't really skip a beat when we moved to that remote structure.
I was really proud of all of our efforts. We really did not skip a beat.
Yeah. We started utilizing Zoom meetings for, again, both our internal and external meetings. And we expect that to continue for the foreseeable future, again, for the pre-renewal meetings, the renewal stuff as we get into that season. Our call forwarding, so anytime one of our clients or vendors calls our office lines, it's forwarded to our cell phones. And if we happen to miss that call, then we immediately get a emailed voicemail so that we can address that call as soon as possible. And then the last thing is we've been using Slack since I think 2018.
Very productive.
Yeah, we started that just to lighten internal emails in our inbox, and it's created a lot more collaboration amongst our teams internally. So
that's, you don't need to be in the same building for that, right? It's instant. Right. It's great. Yeah, so I think that's great. I mean, I think we like to think that we're, performing business as usual as we can, right? And I think that our expectations are that, there may be more Zoom pre-renewal strategy meetings than ever before, but our time frames, and correct me if I'm wrong, but our time frames, nothing's really slipped, and I think that we're being productive. So. Listen, I really, really appreciate everyone's time today. I think this was a great session. I want to thank everyone for watching, and as always, we'll make sure that we share all the contact information for everyone that was on this video. Lastly, I think that everyone should keep in mind that we've worked really hard to fight through this quarantine to get to where we are so that we can start to integrate back into some type of societal norm. So let's not give that up, right? And I think that please be safe, and as a number one priority in this crazy time, keep your eyes out for other regular updates as part of this series. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.